The encounter. In the vast, bustling streets of Soreth, a planet known for its strange alien creatures and dangerous underworld, Captain Jack Carter walked calmly through the chaos. Soreth was a hub for trade and crime, where you could find anything, if you weren't afraid of trouble. Jack had been here before on supply runs for his ship, the Starwind, but this time felt different. His instincts, sharpened by years of space travel, told him something was off. As he passed through the crowded marketplace, a strange noise caught his attention. It wasn't the usual chatter of vendors or the hum of alien languages. It was a scream that cut through the noise, sharp and desperate. Jack froze, his eyes scanning the area. Most people ignored it, pretending not to hear, but Jack couldn't. He had always been the kind of man who couldn't walk away from trouble, especially when someone needed help. In a narrow alley between two towering buildings, he spotted the source of the scream. A young alien woman was surrounded by 3 large, heavily armed bounty hunters. She was different from the others he had seen on Soreth, her skin glowing faintly in the dark. Her fear was clear, but no one else seemed to care. The people in the marketplace kept their heads down, as if this was normal. Jack didn't think twice. He pushed through the crowd and ran towards the alley. As he got closer, he could hear the bounty hunters shouting at the woman. "You're worth a lot of credits, princess," one of them sneered. "Come quietly, or this will get messy." The woman's wide eyes darted around, looking for an escape, but there was none. She was trapped. Jack knew the look of someone who had run out of options. "Hey," Jack called out, his voice firm. "Let her go." The bounty hunters turned to face him, surprised to see a human interfering. Humans weren't common in these parts, and most didn't get involved in fights they couldn't win. The biggest of the 3, a hulking creature with dark, scaly skin, laughed. "You think you can stop us, human? You don't know who you're messing with." Jack shrugged, his hand resting on the blaster at his hip. "Maybe I don't. But I do know this. If you want her, you'll have to go through me first." The bounty hunters didn't hesitate. They lunged at Jack, weapons drawn. Jack was ready. He ducked under the first swing and fired his blaster, hitting one of them in the leg. The second came at him with a knife, but Jack dodged and hit him with the butt of his blaster, knocking him out cold. The third, the leader, snarled and charged. But Jack was faster. A quick shot to the shoulder sent him crashing to the ground. The fight was over in seconds. Jack stood over the fallen bounty hunters, breathing hard. The alien woman stared at him in disbelief, her glowing skin shimmering faintly. She took a shaky step forward. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but filled with relief. You saved me." Jack offered her a small smile. "Just doing the right thing," he said. "Who are these guys, and why were they after you?" The woman hesitated, glancing at the unconscious bounty hunters. "I can't explain everything right now," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But you don't understand. You just saved the life of the Valyrian princess. And now, you're in danger too." Jack raised an eyebrow, the weight of her words sinking in. "A princess," he repeated, already realizing he had just stepped into something much bigger than he had expected. Before he could ask more, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the alley's entrance. Reinforcements were coming. "We need to go," the princess said urgently. "Now." Jack nodded. "Follow me," he said, leading her back towards the Starwind. His quiet trading mission had just turned into a deadly chase, and he had no idea what kind of trouble was waiting ahead. But one thing was certain: he couldn't leave her behind now. The escape. Jack Carter's heart raced as he led the alien princess, Lyra, through the crowded streets of Soreth. They had to move quickly. The bounty hunters would be back, and this time, they wouldn't be so easy to stop. Jack's ship, the Starwind, was docked nearby, but with every step, he felt the danger closing in. "Who exactly are these guys?" Jack asked, glancing over his shoulder to make sure no one was following. Lyra kept her eyes forward, her face pale and tense. "They're hired by the rebels," she said quietly. "They're trying to overthrow my family's rule on Valyria. If they capture me, they'll use me to gain control of the throne." Jack frowned. He hadn't expected this. He was just a simple space explorer, not someone who got involved in galactic politics. "Great," he muttered. "So now I'm in the middle of an alien civil war." Lyra looked at him, her bright eyes filled with worry. "I didn't ask for your help," she said softly, "but I'm grateful you saved me. You don't have to stay involved. If you leave me now, you can still get away." Jack shook his head. "Too late for that. They've seen me. If I let you go, they'll come after me anyway. Besides, I'm not the kind of guy who leaves someone in trouble." They reached the docking bay where the Starwind was waiting, its sleek frame standing out among the worn-down ships around it. Jack quickly keyed in the access code, and the ramp lowered with a soft hiss. "Hurry," Jack said, urging Lyra inside. Once on board, Jack ran to the cockpit and fired up the engines. Lyra stood behind him, her eyes scanning the surroundings nervously. "Are you sure we can get out of here in time?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jack gave her a quick nod, though his mind was racing. "We don't have much choice." The ship's engines roared to life, and Jack wasted no time lifting off the ground. As the Starwind shot into the sky, alarms blared from the control panel. "Incoming ships," Jack muttered. "They've already found us." Lyra gripped the back of his seat. "What do we do?" Jack's hands moved quickly over the controls. "Hold on." 3 bounty hunter ships appeared on the radar, closing in fast. Jack knew they wouldn't back off easily. They wanted Lyra, and they wanted her alive. But he wasn't about to let them take her. The Starwind sped toward open space, but the enemy ships were faster. Jack cursed under his breath as warning lights flashed on the screen. They were locking onto his ship. "Hang tight," Jack shouted. He swerved the ship hard to the left, narrowly avoiding a blast from one of the bounty hunters. The cockpit rattled as another shot grazed their shields. Sweat dripped down his face, but Jack stayed focused. He had been in tight spots before, but this was different. If he didn't lose them soon, they wouldn't stand a chance. "They're too fast," Lyra said, panic rising in her voice. "Not fast enough," Jack replied, his voice calm despite the chaos. With a sudden twist, Jack veered the Starwind into an asteroid field, weaving between the massive rocks. The bounty hunters followed, firing wildly as they tried to keep up. But Jack had the advantage here. He knew how to handle his ship better than anyone. A large asteroid loomed ahead, and Jack saw his opportunity. He dodged around it at the last second, causing one of the pursuing ships to crash into the rock, exploding in a fiery blaze. "One down," Jack muttered. The other 2 ships were still on their tail, but the asteroid field was giving Jack just enough cover to stay ahead. He pushed the engines to their limit, speeding through the narrow gaps between asteroids. The enemy ships struggled to keep up. Finally, after a few tense moments, the second ship clipped an asteroid and spiraled out of control. It exploded in a flash of light. Jack grinned. Just one more. With a sharp turn, he flew the Starwind out of the asteroid field. The last bounty hunter ship tried to follow, but Jack was ready. He pulled back on the throttle, letting the enemy get close, then fired the ship's rear blasters. The bounty hunter ship exploded in a bright burst behind them. "We did it," Lyra gasped, her relief clear. Jack leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. "For now," he said, "but they'll be back. And next time, they'll bring more firepower." Lyra nodded, her expression serious. "We can't keep running forever." Jack glanced at her, his jaw set. "Then we'll stop running. We'll find a way to fight back." The bond begins. After escaping the chaos of Xoreth, Jack and Lyra found themselves on a remote planet known as Zephora. It was a desolate place, covered in rocky terrain and sparse vegetation. The air was dry, and the sun blazed overhead. Jack had decided it was the safest place to lay low for a while and fix the Starwind. As they stepped out of the ship, Lyra took a deep breath, her bright eyes scanning the surroundings. "It's quiet here," she said, her voice soft. "But it feels lonely." Jack nodded, glancing around. "Yeah, but that's good for us right now. We need time to regroup." They walked away from the ship, and Jack started assessing the damage from their escape. The ship had a few dents and scratches, but nothing he couldn't fix. As he worked, Lyra sat nearby, watching him with a mix of admiration and worry. "Thank you for saving me," she said, breaking the silence. "I don't think I've ever met anyone like you." Jack paused, looking up at her. "You don't have to thank me. I just did what anyone should do." Lyra shook her head. "Not everyone would have jumped in like that. Most would have just walked away." Jack shrugged, returning to his work. "Maybe I'm just stubborn. I can't stand seeing someone in trouble." A comfortable silence fell between them as Jack focused on repairing the ship's systems. After a while, Lyra spoke again, her voice softer this time. "Tell me about your home. What is it like on Earth?" Jack wiped sweat from his brow and smiled. "Earth? It's crowded, noisy, and full of people. But there's beauty there too. Cities with tall buildings, forests, rivers, and oceans. It's a mix of everything. You would love it." Lyra leaned closer, intrigued. "I would like to see it one day. But I've only ever known my world. Valyria. It is beautiful, with green hills, blue oceans, and skies filled with stars. But it is also where I lost my family." Jack looked at her, seeing the sadness in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Lyra. I can't imagine what you've been through." Lyra sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "I was supposed to be safe. My parents always told me that my duty was to protect our people. But when the rebels attacked, everything changed. Now I feel like a burden." Jack shook his head. "You're not a burden. You're a survivor. You fought to escape them. And now you have a chance to take your home back." Lyra's expression softened. "You believe in me. I can see that. Most people only see me as a princess. They forget I am still just a person, scared and alone." Jack smiled warmly. "You're more than just a princess to me. You're brave, and you've shown strength. You've already come this far. We can do this together." Lyra looked into Jack's eyes, searching for sincerity. For a moment, the world around them faded, and it was just the two of them. "Together," she echoed, a small smile forming on her lips. "I like that." As the day went on, they worked side by side, fixing the Starwind. Jack showed Lyra how to help with repairs, and she eagerly learned. They laughed over small mistakes, and Jack found himself feeling lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. When they finally finished, the ship gleamed under the Zephyrin sun. Jack wiped his hands on his pants, stepping back to admire their work. "Not bad for a couple of amateurs, huh?" he said, grinning. Lyra beamed back at him, her confidence growing. "Not bad at all. I feel like I've learned so much already." Jack turned serious for a moment. "But we need to talk about what comes next. We can't just stay here forever." Lyra nodded, her expression turning serious as well. "You're right. We have to go back to Valyria and fight." Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. "And I'll be right there with you. Whatever happens, we face it together." In that moment, they both understood that their bond had deepened. They weren't just allies anymore. They were friends, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The path before them was uncertain, but together, they felt stronger. The pursuit of duty. After days of resting and repairing the Starwind, Jack and Lyra were finally ready to leave Zyphora. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the rocky landscape. Jack sat in the cockpit, checking the ship's systems one last time. Lyra entered, her expression a mix of determination and nervousness. "Are you ready?" Jack asked, glancing at her. Lyra took a deep breath. "Yes. I need to go back to Valyria. My people need me." Jack nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He had seen how much her home meant to her, and he admired her bravery. "Then let's do this," he said, his voice steady. "We'll figure it out together." With a flick of a switch, the Starwind powered up, its engines humming to life. As they lifted off, the rocky terrain of Zephora disappeared beneath them. Jack piloted the ship toward Valyria, a place he had only heard about but never seen. Lyra sat beside him, her hands clenched in her lap. "I can't believe I'm going back," she said quietly. "It feels like a dream." "More like a mission," Jack replied, keeping his eyes on the stars ahead. "We have a job to do." As they traveled through the stars, Lyra shared stories about Valyria. She spoke of its vibrant cities, the colorful festivals, and the lush landscapes. Jack listened intently, fascinated by her descriptions. He could see how much she loved her home, and it made him more determined to help her reclaim it. But as they approached Valyria's orbit, a warning light flashed on the control panel. Jack's heart sank. "We have company," he said, glancing at Lyra. "Looks like we're not the only ones heading there." "Rebels?" Lyra's voice trembled. "Most likely," Jack replied, his brow furrowing. "We need to be careful. If they see us, they'll come after us." He quickly adjusted their course, trying to avoid the rebel ships patrolling the area. The tension in the cockpit thickened as they navigated through the shadows of space. Jack's mind raced. He had faced danger before, but this felt different. This time, it wasn't just his life on the line. It was Lyra's future and the fate of her home. Suddenly, a rebel ship appeared on their radar, closing in fast. Jack cursed under his breath. "They've spotted us. Can we outrun them?" Lyra asked, her eyes wide with fear. "We'll have to try," Jack said, pushing the engines to their limits. The Starwind surged forward, but the rebel ship matched their speed. The distance between them closed rapidly. "Jack, they're firing," Lyra shouted, pointing at the screen as blaster bolts shot through space toward them. "Hang on." Jack pulled the ship into a sharp dive, narrowly avoiding the incoming fire. The Starwind shook violently as he twisted and turned, trying to lose the rebel ship in the maze of asteroids nearby. Lyra's hands gripped the edge of her seat. "What if we can't shake them off?" "We will," Jack replied, his voice filled with determination. "Trust me." As they entered the asteroid field, Jack maneuvered the ship expertly, dodging rocks and debris. The rebel ship followed closely, determined not to lose their prey. Jack's heart raced as he focused on the path ahead, knowing one wrong move could mean disaster. "Keep an eye on R6, Jack shouted over the noise of the engines. Lyra turned to look behind them, her breath catching as she saw the rebel ship gaining ground. "They're right behind us." "Almost there," Jack said, his hand steady on the controls. He spotted a narrow gap between two massive asteroids and aimed for it. It would be a tight fit, but it was their best chance. With a deep breath, he pulled the ship into the gap. The Starwind squeezed through just in time, and Jack could hear the rebel ship crash into the asteroid, sending debris flying in all directions. They had lost one of their pursuers, but there was still one more ship behind them. Jack pressed harder on the throttle, pushing the engines to their limit. "We can't stop now," he urged. "Just a little further," Lyra added, her voice filled with hope. As they burst out of the asteroid field, they saw Valyria's bright blue skies and green landscapes ahead. The sight filled Lyra with a mix of relief and determination. There it is, my home. But Jack knew they couldn't celebrate yet. The rebel ship was still hot on their trail. They needed a plan, and fast. "Lyra, are you ready to fight for your home?" Jack asked, glancing at her. "I was born ready," she replied fiercely. Jack nodded, feeling the surge of confidence. They were going to face whatever came next together. The proposal. As Jack and Lyra flew closer to Valyria, the landscape unfolded beneath them like a vibrant tapestry. Rolling green hills stretched for miles, dotted with sparkling rivers and lively cities. But the beauty of her home was overshadowed by the danger that still lurked behind them. The rebel ship was relentless, pursuing them with determination. "Jack, we need a plan," Lyra said, her voice steady but urgent. Jack nodded, his mind racing. "We can't just fly into the capital without a strategy. If we do, they'll be waiting for us." Lyra thought for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. "There's an old palace near the edge of the city. It's abandoned now, but it could serve as a good hiding spot." "Good thinking," Jack replied. "Let's get there first. If we can lose them in the city, we can regroup and figure out our next move." As they neared the capital, Jack expertly maneuvered the Starwind through the bustling skies, weaving between other ships and avoiding the attention of rebel patrols. Lyra kept an eye on their pursuer, her heart pounding as the rebel ship followed closely behind. "Just a little further," Jack said, determination in his voice. "We can make it." Finally, they approached the old palace, its crumbling towers looming over them like silent sentinels. Jack landed the Starwind discreetly behind the palace, hidden from view. As soon as the engines powered down, Lyra jumped into action. "We need to secure the area," she said, her voice steady despite the tension. Jack nodded, impressed by her confidence. They moved quickly, checking the perimeter for any signs of danger. Once they were satisfied, they entered the palace. Dust filled the air, and beams of sunlight filtered through the broken windows, casting eerie shadows on the walls. "This place is ancient," Jack remarked, looking around. "What happened here?" Lyra's eyes softened as she gazed at the decaying beauty. "This was once a grand place. My family hosted many celebrations here. It's sad to see it in ruins." Jack stepped closer to her. "It's still beautiful in its own way," he said, trying to lighten the mood. Lyra smiled faintly. "Thank you for saying that." As they explored the palace, they found a room with a large window overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking, the streets bustling with life, but Lyra's expression turned serious as she stared out. "This is where my people need me," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "I have to convince them that I can lead them. I have to reclaim my throne." Jack turned to her, his heart heavy with concern. "And if the rebels find you first?" Lyra squared her shoulders, her determination shining through. "Then I will fight. I won't run away anymore." Jack took a deep breath, realizing the weight of her words. He had come to admire her bravery, but he also felt a growing fear for her safety. "You're incredible, Lyra. You have a strong spirit, but you don't have to do this alone." Lyra turned to him, her eyes bright with emotion. "You've already done so much for me. You saved my life. I don't know how I can repay you." Jack felt a surge of warmth at her words. "You don't have to repay me. I want to help you, but I need to know you'll be safe. We can fight together." Lyra stepped closer, her gaze locked onto his. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Jack hesitated, his heart pounding. "I want to be more than just your ally. I care about you, Lyra. I've never met anyone like you. You inspire me, and I want to protect you, not just as a friend, but as something more." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "Jack, he continued, his words spilling out. "I know this is all happening so fast, but I can't ignore how I feel. I want to be by your side, not just in battle but in life. I want to ask you, will you marry me?" The air was thick with silence as Lyra processed his words. Jack's heart raced, a mix of hope and fear flooding through him. Would she accept? Would she think he was crazy? Lyra's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Jack, I never expected this. You are brave and kind, and I feel safe with you, but we are in the middle of a war." "I know," Jack interrupted gently, "but I believe in you, and I believe in us. We can face anything together. Just say yes, and we can make it through this." Lyra looked out at the city again, her mind racing. She thought about her home, her people, and the future. Then she turned back to Jack, her heart full of courage. Yes, she whispered, her voice strong. Yes, I will marry you. Jack's face broke into a wide smile, relief washing over him. In that moment, they both knew they were bound by something greater than themselves, a love that would carry them through whatever lay ahead. Allies and betrayal. Lyra and Jack stood in the dim light of the old palace, their hearts racing from the recent chaos. They had just escaped from the rebel soldiers, but now they faced a new challenge. Lyra knew they needed allies to reclaim her throne and protect her people. We should contact the Loyalists, Lyra said, her voice steady despite the fear swirling in her heart. They will stand with me if they know I'm alive and ready to fight. Jack nodded. Do you know how to reach them? Yes, Lyra replied. There's a hidden communication device in the palace. It was used during the last rebellion to connect with our supporters. I can find it. As Lyra searched through the dusty rooms, Jack kept watch by the window, scanning for any signs of danger. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the ground. Time was running out, and they had to act quickly. Found it, Lyra exclaimed, holding up a small device covered in dust. It was old but still functional. She quickly wiped it clean and began setting it up. Let's hope it works, Jack said, his eyes darting back to the door. Lyra pressed a few buttons, and the device crackled to life. This is Princess Lyra of Valeria. Can anyone hear me? Silence fell, making Jack's heart race. Just when he thought the device might fail, a voice broke through the static. Princess Lyra, is that really you? It is, Lyra replied, relief flooding her voice. I'm alive, but I need your help. The rebels are trying to take control, and we must unite our forces. Where are you? The voice asked urgently. We're at the old palace near the capital. I have someone with me, Captain Jack Carter, a human who helped me escape. There was a pause before the voice responded. We know of Jack Carter. His reputation precedes him. We will gather our forces and meet you at the palace. We will fight together. Lyra smiled, feeling hope bloom in her chest. Thank you. We'll be ready. After the call ended, Jack turned to Lyra, his face serious. This could be our chance. If we can rally enough supporters, we might stand a chance against the rebels. Right, Lyra said, determination shining in her eyes. But we need to be careful. The rebels are powerful, and they will do anything to stop us. Just then, a loud crash echoed from outside. Jack's instincts kicked in. Stay back, he warned, moving to the window to see what was happening. To their horror, they saw a group of rebel soldiers approaching the palace, weapons raised. They must have tracked our signal, Jack shouted. We need to hide. Lyra said, panic rising in her voice. No time, Jack replied. We have to fight. Grab your blaster. Lyra quickly retrieved a blaster from a hidden compartment in the palace. They took up positions near the entrance, ready to defend themselves. The door burst open, and the rebel soldiers stormed in. Stop right there, Jack shouted, aiming his blaster at the intruders. The soldiers hesitated, but one of them stepped forward, a sneer on his face. You're not going to stop us, human. The princess is coming with us. Not a chance, Lyra shouted, stepping beside Jack. I am the rightful ruler of Valeria. With a roar, the rebel soldiers charged at them. Jack fired his blaster, taking down the first soldier, while Lyra aimed and hit another. They fought bravely, but the odds were against them. Just as they seemed overwhelmed, an unexpected ally burst into the room. It was Commander Varric, a well-known loyalist leader. He was flanked by several of his fighters. Stand back, he shouted, firing at the rebels. Jack and Lyra were relieved but surprised to see him. Commander, you came, Lyra exclaimed. I couldn't let you face this alone, Varric replied, his eyes fierce. We're here to help. With Varric and his loyalists joining the fight, the tide began to turn. Together, they pushed back against the rebels, their determination fueling their courage. But just when victory seemed within reach, a shocking betrayal unfolded. One of Varric's soldiers, a man Lyra had trusted, suddenly aimed his blaster at her back. "I'm sorry, Princess, but the rebels promised me power," he said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Don't," Varric shouted, but it was too late. Lyra spun around just as the soldier fired. Jack reacted instinctively, pushing Lyra out of the way and taking the hit himself. He fell to the ground, pain shooting through his side. "Jack!" Lyra screamed, rushing to his side. "Stay back!" Varric yelled, trying to fend off the traitor. "We'll take care of him." As chaos erupted around them, Lyra cradled Jack's head in her lap, tears streaming down her face. "Stay with me, Jack. Please." Jack coughed, struggling to breathe. "I'm okay. Just don't let him win," he gasped. Lyra looked into Jack's eyes, filled with fear and love. "I won't. I promise." The battle for Valeria. The chaos in the old palace intensified as the loyalist forces clashed with the rebel soldiers. Lyra held Jack tightly in her arms, her heart pounding with fear and anger. She could hear the sounds of blasters firing, shouts of soldiers, and the crash of furniture as the battle raged on around them. "Stay with me, Jack," Lyra pleaded, her voice trembling. "You have to hold on." Jack's face was pale, and he struggled to breathe. "I'm fine," he managed to say, though Lyra could see the pain etched across his features. "You need to fight. You can't let them win." Lyra shook her head fiercely, refusing to leave his side. "I won't abandon you. You're my strength, Jack. We can do this together." Just then, Commander Varric fought his way to them, pushing aside a rebel soldier who was about to attack. "We need to get him to safety," Varric shouted, assessing Jack's injury. "He needs medical attention now." "No," Jack protested weakly, gripping Lyra's hand. "You have to fight. I can't let you do this alone." Lyra looked into Jack's eyes, seeing the fierce determination that had drawn her to him from the start. "You're not leaving my side," she said firmly. "We're in this together." Varric nodded, seeing the bond between them. "Then let's fight our way out. We can't let this traitor take Valeria. We need to show them that the princess is back, and she is not afraid." With renewed energy, Lyra stood up, still holding Jack's arm around her shoulder for support. They moved through the palace, finding a back entrance that led outside. The battle raged fiercely in the courtyard, where loyalists and rebels fought for control. "Follow me," Varric yelled, leading the way. They emerged into the open air, and Lyra took a moment to absorb the sight before her. The once beautiful palace grounds were now littered with debris, and the screams of soldiers echoed in her ears. But she couldn't falter. This was her home, and she would fight for it. With Jack beside her, Lyra raised her blaster and joined the fray. They fought back against the rebels, the sounds of blasters and explosions surrounding them. Lyra's heart raced as she fought, each blast a reminder of what was at stake. "Watch your left," Jack shouted, aiming at an approaching rebel soldier. Together, they fired, taking down their opponent. Lyra's spirit soared with each enemy they defeated, her resolve strengthening as she fought alongside her allies. She could see other loyalist soldiers rallying around them, inspired by her presence. But just as they began to gain ground, the tide of battle shifted once more. The rebel commander, a tall figure clad in dark armor, stepped forward, rallying his troops with a fierce shout. "For the rebels! For the new Valeria!" The soldiers roared in response, charging forward with renewed vigor. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine as she faced the dark figure leading them. "Stay focused," Varric yelled, rallying the loyalist forces. "We cannot let fear overcome us." With determination, Lyra pushed through the chaos, fighting fiercely alongside her allies. She spotted the rebel commander in the distance and felt a surge of courage. If she could take him down, they might turn the tide of battle. "Jack, can you cover me?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the enemy commander. "Go. "I've got your back," Jack replied, raising his blaster with a pained yet determined expression. Lyra took a deep breath and dashed forward, weaving through the chaos. She dodged blaster fire and ducked behind cover, moving closer to the rebel commander. Her heart raced as she prepared to confront him. Finally, she was close enough to hear him shouting orders to his soldiers. Lyra steadied her aim and took a deep breath. This was it. "Valyria belongs to us," he shouted, raising his weapon. "You will bow to our new rule." "Not if I have anything to say about it," Lyra shouted back, stepping into view. She aimed her blaster at him, determination blazing in her eyes. The rebel commander turned, surprised. "You think you can defeat me, princess? Watch me," Lyra replied fiercely. With that, she pulled the trigger. The blaster fired true, hitting the commander square in the chest. He fell backward, crashing to the ground. The loyalists cheered, their spirits lifting at the sight of their fallen enemy leader. Lyra felt a rush of hope and adrenaline. They could win this battle. But just as they began to push forward, another surprise hit. A rebel sniper, hidden on a rooftop, fired at the loyalists. Jack, who had been covering Lyra, felt a sudden pain in his side. He looked down in shock as blood soaked through his shirt. "Jack!" Lyra cried, rushing back to him. "No." He fell to one knee, pain etched across his face. "I'm okay," he gasped, but Lyra could see the fear in his eyes. Sacrifice and victory. The chaos of battle swirled around Lyra as she rushed back to Jack, her heart racing. The sight of him on the ground, blood staining his shirt, filled her with a mix of fear and determination. "Stay with me, Jack. Help is coming," she shouted, kneeling beside him. Jack struggled to breathe, his face pale. "Lyra, you need to focus on the fight. They're not done yet," he gasped, trying to push himself up but failing. "You have to keep going." Lyra felt tears prick at her eyes, but she quickly brushed them away. "No, I won't leave you like this." She pressed her hand against his wound, desperate to stop the bleeding. "Lyra," he said softly, his voice shaky. "You're the princess. You have to lead your people. They need you now more than ever." As she looked into his eyes, she felt a surge of strength. Jack was right. She couldn't let his sacrifice be in vain. "I will not abandon you, Jack," she said firmly, her voice steadying. "We're in this together." Just then, Commander Varric fought his way to them, fending off rebels as he approached. "What's happening?" he shouted, assessing the situation. "Jack, get him help," Lyra pleaded, looking up at Varric with desperation. "We can't lose him." "I'll do what I can," Varric said, kneeling beside Jack. He quickly examined the wound, his expression grim. "We need to get him out of here. There's a medic station nearby." But before they could move, the rebel forces pushed forward again, regrouping under the command of a new leader. "We can't retreat," a rebel shouted, rallying his troops. "We can finish them now." Lyra felt the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. She glanced at Jack, who was fighting to stay conscious. "I can't let them win, Jack," she said, her voice filled with determination. "You believe in me, don't you?" "Always," Jack whispered, his eyes fluttering. "Then I have to do this," Lyra replied, her resolve hardening. She stood up, gripping her blaster tightly. "We need to turn the tide of this battle. I can't do it alone." Varric nodded, his eyes fierce. "I'll get Jack to safety. You lead the charge, princess. Show them your strength." With one last look at Jack, Lyra turned and ran toward the fray, her heart pounding. She could hear the battle cries around her, the sounds of blasters firing and metal clashing. She needed to rally her forces and inspire them to fight harder. "Loyalists," she shouted, her voice ringing out over the chaos. "We fight for Valyria. We fight for our home. We fight for those who can't fight for themselves." The Loyalists, hearing her words, responded with a roar of approval. Lyra felt their energy surge as they began to push back against the rebels, encouraged by her presence. In the midst of the battle, Lyra fought fiercely, moving with purpose. She took down rebel soldiers one by one, her heart fueled by the thought of Jack and the future they dreamed of together. Each victory brought her closer to reclaiming her throne. Meanwhile, Varric managed to pull Jack to safety, guiding him to the medic station. "Stay with me, Jack," he urged, applying pressure to the wound. "Help is on the way." Jack's breath was shallow, but he nodded, fighting to stay awake. "Lyra, she's strong. She'll do it." Back in the battle, Lyra's determination grew. She faced the new rebel leader, a fierce woman with dark armor and a merciless glare. "You think you can take Valeria from us?" Lyra shouted, her voice filled with anger. "You will never succeed." The rebel leader smirked, raising her weapon. "You're a fool, princess. Your people are weak." With a burst of energy, Lyra charged forward, their blasters clashing in a fierce duel. Lyra fought with everything she had, fueled by the love she felt for Jack and her people. She dodged blasts and fired back with precision, refusing to back down. As they battled, Lyra felt the presence of her loyalists surrounding her, their courage lifting her spirit. Together, they pushed back against the rebels, their unity a powerful force. Just when it seemed the battle might turn against them, a loud explosion rocked the ground. Lyra stumbled but quickly regained her footing. "Now," she shouted, seizing the opportunity. The loyalists surged forward, catching the rebels off guard. One by one, they fell, until finally, the rebel leader was surrounded. Lyra stepped forward, raising her blaster. "It's over." The rebel leader glared at her, defiance in her eyes. "You think you've won?" "I know we have," Lyra replied, her voice unwavering. "You'll never take Valeria from us again." With one decisive shot, Lyra fired, and the rebel leader fell. A cheer erupted from the loyalists, their victory ringing clear through the battlefield. Lyra took a moment to catch her breath, the reality of what they had accomplished sinking in. They had fought for their home and won. A new beginning. The sun rose over Valeria, casting warm rays of light across the landscape. The battle had ended, and the city was slowly beginning to heal from the scars of war. Lyra stood on the steps of the palace, looking out at the people gathered before her. They were battered and weary, but the spark of hope was evident in their eyes. Lyra felt a mix of emotions as she surveyed her people. She had fought hard to reclaim her throne, but now the real work began. "Thank you for your courage," she called out, her voice strong and clear. "Together, we have defeated those who sought to tear us apart. Valeria is free." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing in the morning air. Lyra smiled, feeling the warmth of their support wash over her. They had believed in her, and she would not let them down. "Today, we start anew." Lyra continued, "We will rebuild our homes and our lives. We will create a Valeria where everyone is safe, where every voice matters. We will not forget what we fought for." As the crowd cheered again, Lyra felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Jack standing beside her, looking stronger and healthier than he had a few days ago. "You did it, Lyra," he said softly, pride shining in his eyes. "You brought them together." Lyra beamed at him, grateful for his unwavering support. "I couldn't have done it without you, Jack. You were my strength, my reason to fight." Jack smiled back, and for a moment, the world around them faded away. They had faced death, betrayal, and the unknown, but they had come through it together. Their bond had grown stronger with each challenge they faced. As the crowd began to settle, Lyra turned her attention back to them. "Today, we honor those we lost. They fought bravely for our freedom. Their sacrifice will never be forgotten." The crowd fell silent, and Lyra could see the pain in their eyes. It was a reminder of the cost of war, but also of the hope for a brighter future. "Let us honor their memory by building a better Valeria together," she said, her voice filled with conviction. After the gathering, Lyra and Jack made their way inside the palace. The grand halls felt alive with possibility. "What's next for us?" Jack asked, a hint of curiosity in his voice. Lyra thought for a moment. "We need to gather our loyalists and form a new council. Together, we can decide how to rebuild our city and create a fair government." Jack nodded, his eyes shining with support. "And we can strengthen our alliance with other planets. We don't have to face challenges alone." Lyra smiled, feeling excitement bubble within her. "Yes, we can unite with others, share our knowledge, and learn from each other. A united front will be our greatest strength." As they moved through the palace, they began to discuss their plans. They talked about reaching out to the different communities in Valyria, ensuring that everyone had a voice in the new government. They wanted to create a place where no one would feel left out or alone. Days turned into weeks as Lyra and Jack worked tirelessly to bring their vision to life. They organized meetings with the Loyalists, inviting representatives from every corner of Valyria to participate. The council began to take shape, filled with diverse voices and perspectives. Lyra felt a sense of pride as she watched her people come together. They were ready to work hard to rebuild, to heal, and to grow stronger as a community. Each day, she was reminded of the resilience of her people and the power of unity. One evening, as they were wrapping up a council meeting, Lyra turned to Jack. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said sincerely. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Jack took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "We make a great team, Lyra. Together, we can face anything." Lyra felt a rush of gratitude and love. They had been through so much, and now, as partners, they could embrace a future filled with promise. As they stood together, looking out over the bustling city, Lyra felt a renewed sense of purpose. They would continue to fight for their people, ensuring Valyria thrived as a beacon of hope in the galaxy. "Let's make our new beginning count," Lyra said, determination in her voice. "Absolutely," Jack replied, smiling. Together, and as the sun set on Valyria, casting a golden glow over the city, Lyra and Jack knew they were ready to embrace whatever came next. A new chapter was beginning, filled with challenges, love, and endless possibilities. They were ready to face it all, together.